Good morning. I hope you didn't find multiplying decimals too challenging. Today we're going to look at dividing decimals. And the best way to show you how to divide decimals is to use long division. Again, I'm hoping when you do dividing decimals, you'll use your multiplication chart, not just plugging your question into the calculator and looking for an answer. Doesn't help you understand the process of dividing decimals. So the very first question I'm going to show you is long division of 3 divided into 9.96. On the Google Doc that I've provided with this, I have shown you which section is the divisor, which is the dividend, and when we get the answer, the quotient. Just a math language you should get used to and understand, so that if, say, a question says find the quotient, or what was the divisor, or what was the dividend, that you're familiar with that language. And I've highlighted all of that onto the Google Doc, so it's a little bit easier for you to see. So when we have a question where the divisor has no decimal, we have a pretty easy division question. It's exactly the same as other long division questions, but I notice that I have a decimal here in this section of the question. So no decimal here, but a decimal here makes my life easier. All I have to do is take that decimal where it is, and I'm going to place it in the quotient line. I've just moved it up, I haven't moved it over, I haven't done anything to it. Now I'm basically going to ignore that decimal and do my long division around it, like pretending it's not even there. So when I do long division, I start with the divisor and I look at the first number. Does 3 divide into 9? Well, it does. How many times? Well, I made this question kind of simple because I made it even. So 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. When I subtract this, 9 take away 9 is 0, so I don't need to worry about it. I now bring down this next number. Notice the decimals here. This number is to the right of it, so we have to make sure our answer goes to the right of it as well. So 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Again, subtract 0. And then I bring down the 6. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. And again, because of the way I made this question, we don't have any remainders. So 9.96 divided by 3 is 3.32. Now I've written another question here where there's a decimal in the divisor, and we want to get rid of that. And just like in fractions, if I did something to the numerator, I do it to the denominator. Well, to get rid of this decimal place, I have to move it one place to the right. So my new divisor is 25. And I have a decimal here in this part of the question as well. So if I moved this one place to the right, I must move this one place to the right as well. So I now get 52.5. So 2.5 divided into 5.25. I need to get rid of this decimal, move it one place to the right. I find a decimal here, I move it one place to the right. Now, an important thing to note is if this had just been 525, we know the decimal place is here. Moving it one place to the right, we would just fill in with a 0. And I'll show you an example of that when we're done this. So 25 divided into 52.5. Notice the decimal, I'm writing it right above. How many times does 25 go into 52? Well, 25 and 25 is 50. So I put a 2 here. I didn't bother with this because I know that 25 doesn't go into 5. So 25 times 2 is 50. I subtract. 2 take away 0 is 2. 5 take away 5 is 0. Bring down the 5. How many times does 25 go into 25? It goes once. 25 times 1 is 25. Subtract, and I get a 0 remainder again. Now, if you were doing these long division questions and you kept getting the same remainder, for example, remainder 3, and you added a 0, and you got another remainder of 3. After you've got the same remainder 2 or 3 times in a row, you know you can stop and you can just round. This may not be a question that's going to evenly divide. So if you've added on a few times and you're still getting the same remainder, or your question doesn't seem to be ending, end it after about 5 digits, because you're probably just going to need to round that answer. So let's try one more. Again, in the Google Doc, I've showed these examples as well. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this question 0.52 into 137 decimal 2. I have 2 decimal places in the divisor, 1, 2. Need to get rid of that. Notice I only have 1 here, but I need 2. So I put 1, and then I hold the place with the other one. So my new question becomes 52 into 13,720. And their new decimal place is right here. So now we divide as normal. I'm just going to get rid of this up here so we're not so squished. It's the drawbacks of a small whiteboard. So we're going to put a decimal here. So first thing I look at is how many times does 52 go into 1? None. How many times does 52 go into 13? None. How many times does 52 go into 137? Well, I know that's going to be 2 times. And how did I know that? Well, I know if this is 50. 50 and 50 is 100, but 50, 50, and 50 is 150, which is much more than 137. So I know I only have 2. So 52 times 2 is 104. I subtract 7, take away 4 is 3. 3 take away nothing is 3. 1 take away 1 is 0. I bring this 2 down. And I'm going to estimate that 52 is going to go about 6 times into 332, because I know 50 times 6 is 300. So we're pretty close to that 332. And 52 is more than 50. So I'm going to take that guess and say that that's a 6. And 6 times 50 is going to be 312. How did I do that? Well, 6 times 2 is 12, and 6 times 50 is 300, so 300 plus 12 is 312. Again, I can subtract. I take a 0, because 2 subtract 2 is 0, 3 subtract 2, or 3 subtract 1 is 2, 3 take away 3 is 0. I now have to bring down this 0. Notice I'm still on this side of that decimal. How many times will 52 go into 200? Well, again, I know 50 and 50 is 100, plus a 50 is 150, plus a 50 is 200. And that's great, we're really close, but this is 52 and it's going to bring me over by 8. So I'm going to have to say that it's 3. And that's going to give me 156. When I subtract, I'm going to have to do some borrowing here. This becomes 10, then it becomes 9, this becomes 10. 10 take away 6 is 4, 9 take away 5 is 4. And we can add in as many zeros this way as we want after that decimal. So let's try one more. How many times does 52 go into 440? Well, I know that 8 times 5 is 40. So 8 times 50 is 400. So I'm going to put an 8 here. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 50 is 400. So I get 416. When I subtract that, it gives me a remainder of 34. I'm going to bring down another 0, and this is where I'm going to stop after this one. And I know that 340 is really close to the 312 I used here when I had a 6. So I'm just going to bring this up so you can see it. 340, subtract 312. That's going to give me 38. Actually, it's going to give me 28. And I'm going to say this is good enough. I'm going to leave this remainder here. And we could keep going and going and going. But once you get to the 2 decimal places, feel free to stop the question. Some answers will keep dividing and dividing. And sometimes we get those repeated. But that's not the process I'm trying to show you right now. It's just dividing with decimals. All right? So, I don't really think much of your math homework in terms of dividing with decimals gets this complicated. If there are a few, try to stick it out, see how you do. Again, use your multiplication chart instead of a calculator. Again, we're trying to learn the process. All right, everybody, you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow when we look at order of operations with decimals, which is BEDMAS. Have a great day.